Hello and welcome to the Lab 2 review for CodeZone. So today we're going to cover three things: pickups, elevators / doors, and HUD, the heads-up display. So I'm going to split this into three lectures, but the first one we're going to do is the pickup. And if you remember from our lesson, we actually created a pickup BP parent class, which is the parent of all of our pickups. And so the reason we want to do this is because the pickup is going to have a couple of things that we want all of our pickups to have. So some of those things are a static mesh, as well as a collision sphere, and then we also want to be able to add some methods onto this. So we're going to add a method to modify the health of the player and Modifyscore. So these are methods that we're going to be able to call from our child pickups. So some of the child pickups we have that kind of derive from the pickup are the coin BP. And so you can imagine this one is going to modify your score. We're going to have a bomb BP. And this one will modify your health in a negative way. And then we also created a health pickup, which is like a health pack. And so that would add to your health. So these two are going to call this modify score method. And then the coin BP is going to, or modify health, and the coin BP is going to call the modify score. So if we look at these, all of these have a static mesh. So the coin is going to look like a coin, the bomb is going to look like a bomb. They're all going to be different, but they're all going to contain a static mesh, so something to represent them in the world. They're also going to contain a collision sphere that's going to basically tell when the player interacts with one of these. So if they run over it, basically, it's going to call one of these methods. So with that, we're going to go into Unreal and start creating these. So we'll start with the pickup BP, and then we'll create some child classes. The other thing we want to keep in mind is that these pickups are not going to have any variables on them themselves on the pickup parent class, but our child classes might. So we might say like a default value for how much the coin is worth, how much the bomb hurts, how much health you gain, that kind of thing. Okay, so to start with, we've got our basic level. This is just the default third-person template. So if we play, there's really nothing here. So we want to create an ability to pick some things up. So we'll start with creating a new blueprint class, and this will be an actor. Call it pickup BP. So we can place this in the world, but it's not actually going to do anything right now because it doesn't have a static mesh on it. So that's kind of one of the first things we need to add. So I'll open this up. And then for the pickup BP, I want to add a couple of things to our viewport. So like I said, all of our pickups have a static mesh. So that's the first thing I'm going to add is a static mesh component. And in this case, since this is the parent class, I don't actually need a static mesh for this one, but the children will all have that. Or I don't need to select the static mesh. We also want a sphere collider. So I'll add another component, sphere collision. And this will be kind of this will depend on the shape that we choose for the static mesh. So like if we had a coin here, or let's say we had a cylinder that we're going to use as the coin, just to get an idea of how big we want this collision. I'm going to make this down to 0.25 and then rotate it I'm going to delete this because this is actually going to be on the coin, but I just want to get a good size for our pickups to start with. And then for the sphere, you can see it's kind of inside that, so I want to make it larger. So I can scale this up. So that way it's kind of encompassing the whole coin. So I'm going to compile and save that just so that we have an idea. I'm going to say this is a pretty good size for a coin. You can make them bigger or smaller, but basically you just want something that we can use for our children. So now that I have that, I'm going to remove the static mesh here. I'll just revert back. So it's actually not going to have a static mesh because this is the parent. And for now, that's all I'm going to add to the pickup BP. But if you keep in mind, as we need things on our child classes, we can actually add new things. So we're going to actually add a couple of methods in a bit, but for now, we're not going to add anything. So the first one I want to make is a coin. And you can see I already sort of did that with that cylinder. So I'm going to duplicate this, but instead of just duplicating it, I'm going to create a child blueprint class and call this coin BP. So if we open the coin BP, we'll notice since it's a child class, and if you want to see the child, we can say class settings and see that the parent class is the pickup BP here. So we can see it inherited the static mesh, it inherited the sphere, and so that's all good. So I'm actually going to create this, or set the static mesh to the cylinder for this one. And it's already got the correct scale and stuff. I might actually need to fix that on the parent because I don't want all of my children to have that 25% scale on the Z. But this is a good coin shape. And then we'll add a material. There's a gold material in here. So now if I drag this into my world, let's see, I may need to it's not. What's going on here? Okay, static mesh, coin BP. Oh, I think I dragged my regular pickup back in. So if I drag the coin in, so these haven't updated yet, but if I drag the coin in, you can see it actually looks like a coin. But if I run into it, I definitely cannot pick it up. So that's one of the things we need to change or add. So for the coin, I want it to do a specific thing, right? I want it to add to the score of the player. But one other thing we can do just for kind of aesthetics is, since this is a coin, a lot of times in games you have rotation. So the coins rotate. So I'm going to add a component to the static mesh called a rotator, rotating movement. And without doing anything, just leaving the defaults on there, I think this will rotate. So that's kind of good. You can adjust the speed of that, but that looks fine to me. So let's see, what do we want our coin to do? Well, if we go to our event graph, we want to do something when the coin is collected by the player. And so for that, we're going to use this event actor begin overlap. So I'm actually going to remove these because we don't, these extraneous events, because we don't need them. And take a look at this event actor begin overlap. So the first thing that we need to do is actually check to see whether the other actor is the player character. And so we can do that by just right-clicking and doing a get player character, and then checking to see whether other actor is equal to that. And then, since we have this Boolean return value, we can use a branch to determine whether that's true or false, or to kind of detect whether that's true or false. If it's false, we don't actually want to do anything, because we're just going to assume something else hit the coin, whether it was something else in the level, maybe an enemy or something, or the coin bumped into the wall, that kind of thing. We don't want it to do anything. So we just want to check if the player character is what this bumped into, then this will be true. And so from here, we want to do something like modify the score of the player. But right now, the player doesn't have a score or health or anything like that, and so we need to add all that stuff. We also don't have a method to do that yet, or a function to do that yet. So first thing we're going to do is add those variables to the third person character, the score and the health. And so if we go back here, we can actually find the third person character in here, but the easiest way is to look inside your world outliner and go to edit third person character. So this will open up our third person character blueprint. And there's actually a good bit of stuff here in the event graph, but we're going to ignore that for now. This is all stuff to control your character, which was created by default with the template. So I'm just going to leave that alone. And really what I want to do here is add two variables. So I want to add a variable for health. And this one is going to be a float value, because I'll explain this a little bit more later when we get into the HUD, but basically with the HUD is going to, their HUD is going to have a progress bar that displays the health. And so that's going to be a value between 0 and 1, and so that's a float. And then for the score, we need one more variable. And that one is going to be an integer. So I'll change that to integer. And that should be all we have to do here on the third person character for now. So I'll close that. Now our third person character has a score and health, but we still don't really have a way to access it through the coin BP. And the reason is we don't want to access the score and the health directly through coin. We actually want to create some functions in pickup BP, the parent class, to modify the score and modify the health. So since we're working on the coin, I'm just going to fix this real quick. Since we're working on the coin, I'm going to start with the score. So I'm in my pickup BP blueprint, and I want to create a function called Modifyscore. So to do that, I'll click over here, Modifyscore, type Modifyscore, and then from here I'm gonna do some things, but I do want an input parameter, because I want to be able to know how much do we want to modify for it. How much do we want to modify it? Do we want to add to it, subtract to it, that kind of thing? So we need an input that is an integer, and we'll say amount. So this will be the amount that we want to change the score by. So the first thing that we need here is, since the score is on the third person character, we need to actually get a reference to that third person character. And so what we can do to do that, we can right click again and do get player character, and then cast this to third person character. So if you remember, third person character is the name of the blueprint that we just edited here, where we added the health and the score. So I'm going to go back to pickup EP, connect this execution pin, and this is going to say, okay, we casted our player character to the third person character. If this was successful, if it failed, we don't really want to do anything. But if it was successful, we want to set the score. And we want to add the amount to that. And so we need to get the score from the third person character. So I'll put get score. And then we want to add to that. So I'm going to drag off here and type the plus, and we're going to be adding integers together. And so how much do we want to add, though? We don't want to set it here. We want the coin blueprint or some other blueprint to be able to, like, we might have other stuff than coins, maybe stars or something like that. So we want to be able to add different amounts depending on what the pickup is. And so we actually don't want to set it here. We want to be able to set that in the child class. So I'm going to connect the amount here and then make this a little bit neater. And then from here, we are going to drag off our as third person character again and then set the score. So a lot of times when you increment a variable or decrement a variable or really just change a variable, you need to get it first, get the amount, and then add something to it or subtract something or multiply something, and then whatever the value of that addition is, set that back to the score and connect those execution pins. So this function that we've created will again take the character, get the player character, cast it to the third person character. If the cast succeeds, it's going to get the target score, add the amount that we passed in from this method to that score, and then set it back into the score variable. So now if we save and compile that, we can go back to our coin BP, and now we should have access to this method, this Modifyscore method. And the reason we have access to that is because it is inherited from the pickup BP. So the coin BP is a type of pickup BP, and so it actually has functions in here. And if we look in this list, we can actually see that one of these is the Modifyscore. We're not actually going to override this, but you can see that this that we created, this Modifyscore we created, is in this list. So now if we drag off this true, we can type Modifyscore, and then you'll see we've got two things here. So we have an amount that we can set, and for that we want to actually create a variable on the coin to kind of say how much is this coin worth. And so we'll create another variable called score here. So this is kind of the score that this coin is worth, or that any coin is worth, and that will also be an integer. And then I'll compile that so that we can modify the default value. Set that to 5. And then if we drag that off here, we can get it and pass it into this amount. So now if I compile and save this, if we run it, I need to fix my dimensions again, but if we run it, basically nothing seems to be happening. And one of the reasons is because we're not really we're not printing that out anywhere. And so I'm going to just print that out to the screen. And to do that, I can do, in our pickup BP, I can add another function here called print string, and then just connect the score here. So that should print our current score when we hit the coin. And then since this coin it got stretched out again, I'm going to go back to our coin static mesh and change that back to 0.25. Save it. And now if I run this, you can see it printed out a 5. 10, 15. So if you look in this top left, you can see it's printing out our new score every time we run into that coin. But in most games, coins, they don't persist after you run into them, right? So we need to destroy the actor after we run into it. So that's pretty easy to do. If we go back to coin, back to our event graph. So as soon as we modify the score, we want to destroy actor. That's basically just going to let us hit the coin only one time. So if I play, I get a 5 up there, and then the coin is destroyed. So with this blueprint, one of the cool things about blueprints is now we can just add as many coins as we want into the world. We can alt drag to make copies. So now if I play, I can run into these, and you can see my score up there in the top left is going up. Now eventually, when we're working on the HUD in a later lecture, we're actually going to connect it so that the score is shown, like persists on the screen, so you'll always be able to see it. But that is basically it for the coin BP. So the next thing we want to do is add a bomb. And the bomb is similar to the coin in that when you touch it, it's gonna get destroyed. It's also gonna have a static mesh, but it's gonna do some other stuff too. It's not gonna change your score, but it will change your health, and it's also gonna play an explosion. So to do that, I'm gonna go back to my pickup BP, create another child blueprint class, and call this one bomb BP, and then open that up. So the bomb, to start with, we need to set our static mesh for that. And so for this, I'm just going to set it to a sphere. Let's see. That's the one that I want. There's a couple of spheres in here. That's the one. Okay, so I wanted the one that's a little bit bigger. But set it to the sphere static mesh, and then for our material, I'm going to choose this M-Tech hex tile. And so this is just a material that's in the starter content. So it kind of looks like a soccer ball. Alright, so if I compile and save that, I'm going to put some bombs over here to the right. So now if I drag this bomb in, actually that's a bit too large, so I'm going to use the smaller one for that. So I'm going to go back here. Let's go back to that other sphere. I think that makes more sense. And then I also want to let's see, it actually might have just been the scale. Okay, so sorry about that. Our sphere collider is inside of here. We want it to be about the same size as the bomb, just like we had for the coin. So let's see. Maybe make it a little bit smaller than that. That's probably good. So now if we look in the world, we can see this collider is just about the same size as the bomb. But again, if we play this, or run into it, nothing's going to happen yet because we don't have any functionality hooked up to it. So one of the things that our bomb is going to have is a variable that kind of just stores how much damage the bomb does. So if you remember, our health variable on the player character is a float, and so we want to create another float here that's going to represent the damage. So I'll create a variable called damage and make it a float type, and then compile and save so we can create a default value here, and I'll just put 0.2. So 0.2 is going to be 20% of our player's health. So when they hit the bomb, they'll lose 20% of their health. So we've got that variable. What else do we need to add? So just like in our coin event graph, we use this event actor begin overlap, and we're going to do that same thing with the bomb. And it's going to actually look very similar in terms of, we're still going to need to get the player character to make sure the player was the one who ran over it. So I'll go to back to the bomb BP, to the event graph. Again, delete these extraneous events. And then first thing I'll do is right click and type get player character, because we want to check, is this equal to our what we overlapped with. So we want to make sure that the bomb overlapped with the player and not something else like a coin or an enemy or something. You could actually check in the future, maybe when we add enemies, you could check, did the bomb hit an enemy, because you might also want it to explode if the enemy hit it. So again, we're going to check, was this the player character? If it was, we need a branch that will connect up here to our execution pin. And then if it's true, we want to modify the health of the player, right? However, we don't, based on the damage. However, we don't have a function for that yet. So we need to go back to our parent, our pickup EP. And you'll see why we're doing this in the parent in a little bit, because we're going to do a health pickup, which is also going to modify the health. So we've got this Modifyscore function that we added. So we also want to add a modify health function here. And again, this one needs an input parameter, but this time it's going to be a float. And we could call this the same thing, amount, because if we call it damage, that may not make sense when we're adding health. So we've got modify score and now modify health. And so this one's going to be a little bit more complicated, because we do want to do a check to make sure the health doesn't go below 0. And the reason for that is, in general, your player's health can't go below 0, and if it does, then you die. So we're going to check for that in a later lesson. But for now, we would just want to get the player character again, and again we're going to cast to third person character. Connect these execution pins, and if this cast failed, again we're not going to do anything. We're just going to this should not fail, so that we're just not going to do anything if it did. But we want to first check if we add the amount to the current player's health, is that going to go below 0, or is it going to, if it is, we're just going to set the health to 0. So we need to again get the player health. So since we have that health variable in our third person character controller, we can get that health float. And then we want to add the amount to it. So we'll do a plus, and then take this amount here and snap it in there. Make this a little bit neater. So this value here is going to be whatever the damage was plus whatever the value of the health was to begin with. And so we want to make sure that didn't go below 0. And so to do that, we'll say, is this value greater than? And we'll do the greater than symbol. And then here we know that we just want to leave this as 0 because we want to just check, is this value greater than 0? And then we want a branch. And for our branch, we can connect that to the execution pin from the cast node. So I'm going to bring these down actually so that we can see all this a little bit easier on one screen. So if the health after we added the amount was greater than 0, then all we have to do is just set the health to the amount. So we can drag off of this third person character and then set health. And we'll just set it to the value of this addition here. So let's say your health was 0.5 and you added, or you subtracted 0.2 and now it's 0.3, then we're just going to set that back to the health. So that's fine. But if it's 0.1 and you added negative 0.2, then it's going to go below 0, so we're just going to set it to 0. So in the case that this is false, we're just going to set the health to 0. So that's basically it. Now all we have to do is go back to our bomb and call this method. And so when we pass an amount in, it's going to change the character's health by that amount. And what I realized when I was doing that is that our damage should probably not be 0.2. It should probably be negative 0.2. Because what we're doing in our modify health is adding the amount to our health. So this will make more sense when we're adding health from a health pack, but when we're adding damage, we want to add negative damage. So we want our bomb to do negative damage. So back in our bomb, we check to see, is this the player? If it is, we're going to call that modify health. And then we want to pass in the amount that we set in our damage variable. And since this is a bomb, we want to do a couple of other things. So just like in the coin, we want to destroy it at the end. But before we do that, we're going to we're going to create an explosion. So right now, this should actually modify the health, but it doesn't do anything else. So let's test that first. If we go back to our modify health function in pickup BP, we can do a print here and print the health. And this is just for testing, so don't worry too much about this, but this is basically going to, when we call this function, it's going to print the new health. So let's see. If we hit the bomb, it says 0, 0, 0. Okay, so one thing I realized is that our default value for our health in the third person character is probably 0. So we want to set that to 1. So I'll save that, run it again. Now when we run into the bomb, so we got 0.8, 0.6, 0.4, 0.2, 0.0, and then it stays at 0 because we set that so that it would never go below 0. So that's good. Everything's working correctly as we would expect. But we still need to destroy the bomb and spawn a explosion. So first thing I'll do is drag off this and type spawn emitter at location. And an emitter is a particle system which has there's a lot to go into with that, but there's some default ones that are built into this project, so we'll just pick one of those for now. And I'll pick explosion, P explosion. And it has a location, where do you want to spawn this? And so we just want it to be the location of the bomb, wherever the bomb is placed. We don't want it to explode somewhere else, right? We want it to explode where the bomb was hit. So I'm going to get, if I right click, I can do get actor, let's see, get world location. And then any one of these should work. Default scene root is fine. That's going to be, or the static mesh or the sphere, they all actually have the same location in this case. So we're going to get the world location, and then the return value I'm going to pass into the location of the emitter. So now we can test that. Now if you see I run into it, you see this explosion effect happens. So that's cool. But our bomb is still not getting destroyed. So next we want to play a sound effect as well. So I'm going to drag off here and then play sound at location. And again, we want the sound effect to play at the same location where the bomb exploded. And there's a sound explosion 1 in here. And I'm going to, this sound is actually really loud, so I'm going to click this down arrow here and do a volume multiplier of 0.2. So that'll make that a little bit less loud. And then again, this one has a location, and I'm going to pass that same location from the default scene root of the bomb. Okay, so compile and save that. Now if I run it, so if you can hear that sound, it's not very loud, but it's there. So the last thing we need to do is destroy the bomb. And again, just like we did in the coin VP, we just do destroy actor. That's it. Compile and save. And now as soon as I hit it, it gets destroyed and my health goes down. So I can drag multiple bombs in here. I can alt drag, and then just character can run over them. And so these are good obstacles. You can still collect the coins. And so you can see that my score is going up when I collect the coins. My health is going down when I collect the bombs. So the last pickup we're going to do, just real quickly, is a health pickup. It's going to be very similar to the bomb, because we're also going to be modifying your health, but we don't really need an explosion, or I mean, we could add a sound effect. I don't know if there's anything appropriate in this project, but basically I'm just going to make it add to the health and then get destroyed. So to do that, very similar to the bomb, we can actually copy the bomb and delete parts of it. So I'm going to, instead of making a child of the pickup, I'm going to duplicate the bomb and type health BP. So this is it's an exact duplicate of the bomb, but we don't really want it to look the same as the bomb, right? So I'm going to just, let's see if there's a kind of red material, so that'll be our health pickup, and we'll still make it a sphere. We don't want it to explode though, right? So in our event graph, we can actually change this damage to heal. Just change the name of that so we know, okay, this is a health pickup. It's actually going to heal us, not hurt us. And then instead of 0.2, I'm going to change that to, or instead of negative 0.2, I'm going to change that to 0.3. So it'll heal by 0.3 or 30% when we pick this up. And then don't really need to play a sound or spawn an emitter. I guess we could see if there's any appropriate sounds. Maybe I could just do like a click sound. But I definitely don't need to spawn the explosion. So I'll connect those again. And run this and see, well, we don't have any in the scene yet, so let's add a health pickup in here. So you can see how easy it was to make a new pickup with what we had. So let's hurt ourselves a little bit. 0.2. Go down to 0.2, and then let's see if we gain some health now. Okay, so we collected the health pickup, and we got back up to 0.8. So you can see how easy it is to make more pickups. If you wanted to have different types of coins, maybe, or something else with a different score amount that you want to add to it, or something else that damages you. So maybe some traps in the game or something like that, or other type of health packs. So that's a pretty easy way to do pickups. You can use these in your games, and I think that's pretty much it. Let me just walk through here real quick. I think that's everything we need. Yeah, so this is all the code for the pickups. In the future, what we'll do when we get to our HUD is in our pickup BP, instead of printing a string at the end of these modify score and modify health, we're going to update the characters, or we're going to update the HUD. So we're going to actually display that to the screen in a different way. But that's pretty much it. See you in the next one.